Hello everybody, Skylar Marsh here, and what we're going to take a look at today is cutting graduation and how we can take something that's just a fundamentally sound haircut and turn it into something that looks a little bit more on the creative side. What I love about cutting hair is there's not 100% way that it has to be done. There's so many different variables and things that you have to consider when you're talking about or breaking down or planning to cut a haircut. That goes from the paneling to how elevation is going to work, how your over direction is going to work, and how that sectioning pattern is going to work throughout the haircut and how it's going to help you control those outcomes. So what I would love for these videos to be viewed as is not as an instructional or directional video, but more of the thought process of breaking down a haircut from the very beginning to the very end and how I made a choice from my paneling to my sectioning and how that paneling and sectioning allowed me to better control elevation and over direction for more consistent shape up and down and forward and backwards.
Paneling for a haircut should be specific to that haircut. Paneling is used to separate areas of change, such as bone structure, elevation, over direction, or a change in sectioning pattern. I'm going to be working with a consistent elevation and over direction throughout the entire haircut, but the one thing that is going to change in it is the direction of my sectioning pattern. To help me control the weight of the haircut, I'm going to place a horizontal diagonal forward panel line from the mid-high occipital bone to just above the ear. This is going to be my reference of where I want the weight of the graduation to sit, and it's also going to be my reference of how I want my sections to work from a vertical section into a horizontal section. In the world of haircutting, weight tends to follow section angle. The more vertical your section angle is, the leaner the result typically is. The more horizontal your section angle is, the heavier your outcome tends to be. I'm going to use this in my favor to help me better control the weight of the graduation.
Beginning in the bottom of panel 1, my section is closer to vertical with a slight diagonal forward to it. What this is going to allow me to do is to look at the length of the top of the section and the bottom of the section at the same time and connect those two lengths together, which is going to tell me how heavy my buildup of weight is going to be and how short my length in the nape is going to be.
My next section is going to come up my center division line and out the hairline. To control both my elevation and over direction, I'm going to comb up from section 1 to establish my elevation and down on top of section 2 for proper over direction.
You notice it's not over directed back behind the section, it's away from the face. Because I'm working behind the head and I'm pulling my section backwards, I'm creating all the over direction that I need. So it's not that we're over directing it, we're just pulling it away from the face. As my section starts to become a little bit more diagonal, my cutting line now is influencing different things. My cutting line before was strictly up and down and impacting my graduation, but now my cutting line is impacting my length from back to front, and elevation is starting to control my buildup of weight bottom to top. My section is now almost truly diagonal. And once I reach this point, I really need to start making sure I know what my elevation should look like. So I'm going to reference the head shape in the top of my section as what is 90 degrees and then adjust my elevation from there. So if my scissors are representing 90 degrees, I'm going to pull my section down to what I feel about as 45 and go ahead and make my cut. I'm going to keep that same thought process through every single section. I'm going to cross check horizontally just to inspect my over direction to make sure that I don't have too much over direction. I should see almost a flat shape across the back. I won't see an increase in length until I reach to this little portion as the head shape rounds away from me. Now that my sections are really starting to become almost more horizontal, the hairline really impacts how wide my section is at the outside. So stay controlled and stay consistent and split this into 2 to 3 more sections for the proper control of elevation and over direction. In the front hairline, I'm just going to reference that little area for over direction, just to make sure that I'm not over directing too much. Now, in this region, we might be panicking because we don't have the length that maybe we thought we would. If our goal was to create as much length from back to front as possible, then we should have taken a different approach from the very beginning. My last section, just keeping my elevation consistent. You notice I'm rotating the doll head and holding the hair at the same time. That's going to allow me to control over direction and elevation. Cross-check vertically. On the outside of the hairline, my cross-check might look a little bit fuzzy because of the shape of the actual hairline. I'm going to cross-check horizontally from the center division line to the outside of the hairline, and I'm just inspecting for a consistent increase in length in that panel. Working in my top panels, I'm going to combine the top panels together This is going to give me ability to comb and section from back to front more consistently. Combing the hair or grooming the hair the way you intend to section it is going to allow you to control and create cleaner sections. Bone structure is my reference for elevation. Here we'll see at the top of my section pulling the hair down, and the top of the section is my reference for what my cutting line should look like. So in the front of the haircut, my elevation is not pulled down, it's pulled out away from the head, following the same cutting line from back to front to establish my front length. Each section from here on out is going to work from the back of the head all the way into the front of the front hairline. Same control. I'm going to keep the section elevated in my hand as I rotate the doll head. This allows me to keep elevation consistent, and it allows me to keep my over direction minimal as I'm moving my guest's head position. So I'm keeping over direction where it needs to be. Once I reach the top or reach to the top of the head, we have a tendency to pull the hair down and back because we're trying to maintain or create length. And again, I'm going to go back and say that if our goal was to create or maintain more length at the top and the front, then we should have chosen a different approach from the very beginning. Above the parietal ridge, I really want to be mindful of my over direction, that it's just away from the face and not behind the head. I'm going to cross-check vertically from top to bottom, and I'm just going to be inspecting the control of elevation. If you notice I have a buildup of weight, but above my fingertips, it's going to look like it almost rounds out, and that's because we've had a consistent elevation through every single section, and that's because of the shape of the head. I'm going to cross-check horizontally from back to front, and I'm just looking again for that gradual increase in length and a consistency in my line horizontally. Beginning in my second bottom panel, the biggest adjustment that we're going to have is our hand position. My fingertips are now going to be pointed down, and I'm going to be cutting from my fingertips up. So that means my elbow is above my fingertips, and I'm working almost vertical straight up and down. Now, to help control this and make this a little bit more comfortable, I'm going to roll my scissors over without bending my wrist, and then just use the tip of my scissor to work and cut my cutting line so it remains consistent. But rolling my scissors over it allows me to almost put my hand on top of the shoulder of my guest and work my way up so I can still keep my cutting line nice and clean. When you're cutting with your fingertips pointed down and your elbows up, your elbow has a natural tendency to drive your hand down, which will change your elevation and change your cutting line. So keep your fingers vertical, keep your fingers tight, and keep your elbow up. Use your comb as a reference to control that cutting line and keep things consistent. Once I've cut my first couple sections, now that hand position has actually become super comfortable because my fingers are a little bit more diagonal, so almost horizontal, and I can get my scissor length into that. When I cross-check now, I'm going to look cross-checked from both sides, side to side, and I'm going to inspect for consistency and length. Keep your section size consistent, rotate your doll head to control over direction, and reference bone structure for your elevation. I'm a big section counter, so I counted 7 sections on the lower left-hand panel, 7 sections on the right-hand side. I like to have consistency in sections because it shows that I did things accurately from left side to right side.
Like I did in the other bottom panel, I'm really paying attention to the hairline and its impact on my section size, and I'll adjust my sections to compensate for the hairline.
Completing my top 2 panels again by combing them together and working from back to front. Following the same sectioning pattern, consistent elevation, and consistent over direction as I did from side 1. In the front hairline, what I really want to be mindful of, what my over direction needs to be. This is my natural fall. This is all the over direction I need in combination with my cutting line to create the length that I'm looking for in the front. So my sections are going to continue just to work from back to front, that remain that same horizontal diagonal forward section angles, consistent elevation, consistent over direction.
At some point, my elevation almost feels like it's becoming stationary. I don't want my haircut to suddenly become heavy, so I'm constantly looking at where the hair lives on the head shape and adjusting my elevation per section to remain consistent from the bottom hairline all the way to the top of the head.
Combing all of the hair down into its natural fall, I'm going to start in the center back, and I'm just going to connect my links. The reason I want to comb it in its natural fall is because we've created panel lines. I want to make sure that the top of the hair is cut where it naturally sits or lives. So what we see as my basic shape is what we would call triangular graduation. It's a buildup of weight and it gets longer towards the face. Before I begin refinement, I'm just going to inspect my blow dry, looking for any inconsistencies in the finish, but I'm really just inspecting to make sure my finish is smooth and beveled. So I'm going to start my refinement actually on the interior. I want to soften the weight before I create a new outline. I'm going to soften the weight above the hairline first, because I need that hairline to be intact to create my outline. All that I'm doing is elevating the hair out, and I'm coming into the ends of the hair and changing the density so there's less hair on the ends, which means I can create a stronger outline. Through each section, I'm going to point into the length of hair, and then I'm going to elevate the section again and point into it again. There's softer graduation, and the reason why I didn't pull my elevation down at the very beginning. This refinement method can be done overhand, as I'm showing here, or it can be done in comb, as you're going to see here in a little bit. Each has its advantages. I prefer to do it overhand, so I can just grab the section and easily elevate it back out. I can look down on top of my section. When you're cutting it in comb, if you notice there's a bit more tension in there from the comb, so you can use a wider tooth comb, which is going to allow you to free up some of that tension. But one of the advantages of this is I can slowly elevate the section and keep it in my comb as I'm working through. In areas of high density, I'm going to continually elevate as I point into that section, which is going to allow me to remove some of that density in that area and allow the hair to lay flatter to the shape of the head. So when I create my outline, really what I'm going to have to look at is where my shortest point is at, because that's going to allow you to create your outline. So I'm going to work from my longest point in the center back to the nape up to my shortest point on this side, which is right at the massoid process. My cutting line is slightly at an angle, which is going to allow me to create a more rounded effect on this side. So working up to my short point, and then from that short point all the way into that front hairline, I'm just going to clean out my extra length. This again goes back into the very beginning of why I didn't want to leave the hair really full at the beginning, because it makes it incredibly difficult to make a clean line at the end. Changing the direction of my scissors allows me to get any hair that I might have pushed as I worked through those last few little sections. In that front hairline, I know there's still a little bit of length that I need to control, so I'm going to take a flat clip, push the hair back with my comb, and allow the clip to hold the hair in place. If you notice there's a little tiny nugget that appears right here, I'm going to come in with my scissors and then knock that little guy out. On the opposite side, I want to keep the side a bit more triangular. So again, I'm going to go for my shortest length, which is right at the massoid process, and work my way back to where I started to round out my perimeter on the other side. So on this side, if you notice, I'm closing my scissors and I just slightly pull my hand back away as I close my scissors. That allows you to close your blade, but pulls the hair into the blades, and it's going to allow you to create a crisper, cleaner line throughout the back of this. Our scissors, no matter how sharp they are, have a tendency to push hair. When you get into this point, this is just one way to alleviate the pushing of the hair, or to minimize the pushing of the hair. Working to my last little point here, then we can jump to the front and then connect my dots from the front to that massoid process.